First, I'd like to thank Salpi and everybody at the Armenian Institute for inviting me to do this. We have had these wonderful talks. I direct the Korean Studies Institute here at USC. And Salpi and I have talked, we've shared ideas about turning a rooftop into a garden where we can hold parties and stuff like that. And when she was talking about Armenian identity and what we're going to do, I started chatting about how I grew up as a Korean. And I don't have anything nearly as profound as Manuel's talk about larger themes in LA or changing identity. But I am going to make one point to you today. So I'm going to tell you a story about myself, which is the most interesting. But the question is this, and the point I'm going to make is this, about the social construction of identity. And what I mean is, we tend to think there's sort of two sides. If anybody here has had a class in identity, like, I don't know, women's studies or blah, blah, Armenian studies, they always talk about how identity is socially constructed. But we all believe that it's actually biologically given, depending on where you're born and who your mom and dad are. And so I'm going to talk about what I mean, because it is clearly socially constructed. And what I'm going to do is tell you a couple things about mine, because I don't have any identity crisis at all. I don't have any doubt who I am. I view myself as Korean American, and I've always viewed myself as Korean American. And my entire life, no one has ever questioned that. Up until after living from California, my folks met at Cal in the 1950s. I moved on the East Coast. I moved back to Los Angeles about 6 years ago. And for the first time in my life, I heard people saying, well, since you're mixed race, blah, blah, blah. And the first time somebody said that to me, oh, me? And I've had that happen a dozen times when people say, oh, since you're mixed race, as if we're all one crowd, and here we all know what it means to be hapa, that's another word, or mixed identity and things like that. And I realized I needed to start explaining why, even though my mother might be called white, her maiden name was Hildegard Ivy Smith. There's no more waspy name than that, right? I don't view myself as mixed race. And I think this is interesting because it shows how identity is socially constructed. It depends. It is not biologically given. Well, your mom's white, therefore you're mixed race. And I'll tell you exactly what I mean. If the category doesn't exist in the world, you don't have that identity. The category of mixed race is new, and even now it is not really that widely used. So if you're growing up in a time like Manuel Pastor was talking about, in which most of California, where I grew up in the Bay Area, was white, ethnic, everything, you didn't have a mixed race category. So I'm going to talk to you about it. There's two ways. There's internal, there's family, and then there's larger situational, right? And I'm going to do a couple things. And the first one is, there are 5 reasons in my 10 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 reasons, 3 internal and 2 external, about why I view myself as Korean American. And at the end, I'll conclude just in general. I think it's interesting. We can all think about, how do we form who we think we are? How do we form, like the first speaker about like sort of our partial identity, partial Armenian? How do we do it? So the 3 internal are this, right? The first one, the internal identity, there's me and my sister, Kyopta, right? My father came from Korea in 1955 to study at Berkeley. He got a PhD in physics. He met my mom there, and we got married. And there's 3 things. So first of all, here's my name. This is my given name. If you go to my birth certificate, that's my name. And I never use my middle name, Chanung, right? I just do C, because I don't care. But that is my given name. And my entire life growing up, I wished I had a normal middle name like Bob or Sam. Because imagine being in 1970s California, and this is your middle name, and people do, ah, ha, ha, right? You know, and that's my name in Korean, right? Actually, it's Chinese characters, but that's my name in Korean. Now, what does this mean? We are a patrilineal society. I didn't make the rules. But you go through your father. And so if you don't see a picture of me, if you just see what my name is, and 99% of the people in the world, when they read what I write, when they sign up for my classes, they see that, and what do they expect? They expect someone who's Korean American. In fact, I've had students come up to me and say, wow, your English is really good. I was really worried, that you weren't going to be able to speak English very well. Because this is what they see. And if you see me, I don't quite look like Sam, Sam the Surfer or something like that. So I didn't make the rules. but we are a patrilineal society, and I am defined by my father's identity. And in fact, I don't know if I have these things here. If you can read Korean, I am the 39th generation. I don't know if it says it here. Yes. We can trace that. If you read the Chinese, that's founder number 1, 720 AD. I'm the 39th generation. And point number 2, I'm the eldest son of the eldest son of the, I'm a 9th generation eldest son. The founder goes back to 720, and we know he existed. My link to Korea is 1,300 years. It's an extraordinary sense of belonging. And if you go down a second generation, third generation, fourth generation, eventually you get here to the bottom, which is our family right there, which is, again, I'm not saying you can read Chinese, but the point is everybody's got a book. My son is the 40th generation. He's a 10th generation eldest son of this family. Of course I feel Korean American. Of course I have deep roots to Korea. How can you not? My grandfather still says, 40th generation, and pats his grandson on the head, right? So again, I didn't make these rules, but why do I think I'm Korean? Here's why. Right? Number 2, my mom is an orphan. She was born in Oakland, and her mother died, and her father was a doctor, died of a heart attack at age 5. Mother died of one of those diseases they can fix now. She was raised by her grandmother. So yeah, she's Hildegard Ivy Smith, but I did not grow up with any white side of the family. This is my family that I grew up with. Everybody's Korean, except my mom. And my mom married into the Korean family knowing what she was getting because she wanted large families. She grew up without anyone except Granny. She wanted those large, warm Korean families and Asian families. So this is, my grandparents lived with us until I was about 8. This is on their 60th birthday for my grandfather. It's a big celebration, right? Now, I'm going to show you a picture this is like 1973 or something like that, right? There's me, there's my sister, there's my dad and my mom over there, right? You have to look to figure out which one is not the Korean one, don't you? Right? Now, so what we did is in our garage, we had a big 60th party. We invited all the friends. We have all this Korean food, as you can see, the bounty of Korean food. And this is what all of our American friends, oops, wait, there we are again. We're lined up. There's my mom on the right? This is their view of the Korean food. They're all like, what is that stuff, right? It's hilarious. You know, like, you look at this picture and like, my sister's diving in and all the American people are like wondering, what is this Korean food? I mean, this is from the 1970s. Nobody knew what kimchi was back then, right? So if you grow up with a Korean family, a Korean immigrant family, where there is no white side of the family, there is no Uncle Tommy. We didn't go every Thanksgiving to, grow up with a bunch of white cousins who did American things. We only did Korean things. And I'm the eldest son of a family that goes back generations to a country, right? So internally, there's a whole lot. And what I mean by this is not that everyone's like me. It's socially constructed. Different people with different parents and different situations would have a different identity. But if you ask why I view myself as Korean American, there you go. Right? That was not in question, right? I can tell you a lot of stories about being called Chink and Jap as well, because nobody even knew Korea. So when people wanted to make fun of me, they would call me, slurs about Chinese and Japanese, right? Here we are again at some birthday, right? But then there's an external element as well. It's not just what your family is. And this is going to what Manuel was talking about earlier. I grew up in California at a time when today it's really easy to forget how quickly California has changed. And I think Manuel did a great job of showing that. The California I grew up in 1970, I'm too old to actually have a hybrid identity. I'm too old to have, frankly, an identity crisis. Right? I grew up in a time when if you go back to 1970, Asians were like 0% of the population. Hispanic was what, 12%? This is, I don't want to give away how old I am, but I was in elementary school in the 70s, right? So you grew up, everybody's white. There's a tiny smattering of Asians, and they were all third or fourth generation Japanese or Chinese, who'd come over literally to do the railroads. There are only 2 Korean families in the entire town. again. So everybody's white. So of course, you grow up in a context in which there isn't hybrid identity, there isn't mixed race, there isn't even a category for Korean. Like I said, I mean, all the insults were always about Chinese or Japanese or something like that, right? So the identity that I have was formed at a particular time in a particular place. And what's amazing about this chart is not only how much it's, how white it was at the time. And all of you would probably, at that time, as I look out, all of you would probably count in the white category, although it's so interesting. Armenian is, you know, it's like, is it central? Blah, blah, blah. When we first moved, we live in Los Feliz, so all of my neighbors are Armenian. Everybody's, the people next door, 95, they speak Turkish all the time, right? Because that's, they were born in 1915 or something like that, right? And at first, my wife and I had no idea. We had to look up who Armenians were. We're like, oh, the food is great, but who are these people? We had no idea. And I'm not exaggerating. We thought it was great, but we learned a lot, right? Because we had no idea, right? And the second thing is this: the category is still not mixed race. There still is not really a mixed race category. Obama is not the first mixed race president. No, he's not. He's always viewed, essentially, as the first black president. Tiger Woods. He's not the first Hapa mixed race Asian golfer. Nobody thinks of him that way, right? The categories have to exist for you to then define yourself within those categories. Or you can create your own category. I mean, it's partly by how you define yourselves or whatever. But if today we are still not talking about mixed race, it's very hard for someone like me who grew up in the 60s and 70s, wearing Korean clothes, eating Korean food, celebrating with a whole mess of Korean family, to think of myself as Korean American. And that's what's so interesting about the social construction of identity. I mean, I think, my story is interesting only because Korean, we always talk about it, and I can always play I'm the 39th generation of this particular Korean clan. And I have immediate entree into all of Korea because oh, okay, come right this way, And I totally understand if your father is not Korean, but your mother is Korean and she marries someone, who's not Korean, you have a totally different identity. I get it. But the point I want to leave you with as I finish up is not only how awesome my family is. Well, that's the main point. No. But the point I want to leave you with is how much who we are and who we think about ourselves is really socially, it is you, and you're going to feel differently about you because of where you might have grown up, even in a different town in California, and had different experiences. So your attention to what it means, how you perform identity, what you don't even question as identity. The categories as we change, as California changes, we're getting more and more of these different hybrid identities. I think it's awesome. But the point is, it's not biologically given. It's very hard, I think. We all get it intellectually. Yeah, sure, of course, it's all constructed. It's all imagined. And yet, when we're really talking to people, we think it's all biological. Well, your dad was born in this part of the world and your mom was born in that part of the world. Therefore, you think of no. Right? And so one of the reasons Salpi and I have so much fun talking about identity is because clearly Armenians are going through very similar issues that Koreans are. We're extremely diaspora. Koreans are everywhere, right? Like LA has home to more Korean, the largest concentration of Koreans outside of Korea live here in LA. And they are doing the taco truck. And rapidly, the thing about most immigrant populations in general is it's not cool to be in K-Town. Success is getting out of K-Town and changing, right? Which makes me feel sad because when I first moved here, you had to speak Korean to go to most K-Town places. Now you don't even have to speak Korean. What is happening? No, right? It's changing, and it is awesome to watch, but it also should be empowering to all of us that there is nothing that is biologically given, and the choices and the decisions, it's like Manuel said in a way, the choices, decisions, identities we choose today are our own to make. And so I will stop there, and thank you very much for listening to me.